Hello, everyone. Thanks for coming. We're gonna give it a minute. That's it, and then we will um, start the show here. Let's see if we have any of these polls ready. Well, let's see how prepared we are. Let's do this one. You'll see a question appear. Yes, I like this one. How prepared do you feel about, should be about the college admissions process? So, love to get a sense of who's on here. If you are a little worried, you think you got it, you think you can run the webinar so me and Dan can sit back, or you're so confused you don't even know how you got here. And then sorry for the untitled question two. There is no question two, so thank you for those choosing choice 1 and 2. Let's do a little in the chat. State of your location. And in the chat, if you can just say where you're from. And then we'll get started in about 30 seconds, introduce ourselves and get rolling. But yeah, we'd love to hear where you guys are from. Ooh, Dan, we got one person that said they could run the webinar.
I know, right?
I like it.
Let's sign them up. All right, Dallas. Colorado, Boston, yeah.
Salem.
All over the place.
Salem is where our offices are.
That's right.
JP.
Waikiki.
Yeah. Philly. All right, we're all over. Love it. All right, you want to open up the slides and we'll get going?
You got it.
For everyone here on time, which we appreciate. All right, thank you. So yes, hopefully you're all here for this webinar. We run a lot of different ones, so it's definitely possible you may be at one that you're not interested in this. So tonight we're going to be talking about what colleges are looking for, and really specifically for underclassmen parents. And we are defining underclassmen parents and families as 9th, 10th, 11th graders. It's very different though among those 3 years of what you should be doing and what you should be prepared for. So we're going to try to break down all those grade years and give you actionable advice that you can take away with you in this webinar. And want to start just by giving some background of who we are at College Aid Pro, what we do, big high-level topics about college admissions, and we'll get into specifics for you. Yes, this will be recorded. It will be sent out, so you have to leave early, no worries. Or if you have a friend that couldn't make it, as long as they registered, they will get an email and a recording of this in the next day or two. So College Aid Pro, who we are, our mission is pretty simple. We want to empower families to shop smarter for college to end the student debt crisis. And we are very much in a crisis, when it comes to college student debt. Paying for college, we know, is the biggest financial concern for 73% of parents and students. And that 73, almost, 3/4, figure is a silent stressor in most households. And our goal is to replace that stress with a strategic plan. And again, we want to end the debt in America. We do that by our proprietary platform, which is amazing, MyCAP, which if you haven't seen, make sure you go to our website and check it out. And our one-to-one advising from both financial aid pros and admission pros like me and Dan. And my background, real quick, I've been doing college admissions counseling specifically on the high school side, helping high school students and families get into college for 17 years. For a decade, I worked at 2 different private high schools, one in New Jersey and one in Manhattan as a director of college counseling. And then have been, working at a private firm, helping families one-to-one. And I'm doing that here at College Aid Pro as well. And I am in New Jersey, Westfield, right outside New York City. And Dan, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Joe. Yeah, so again, welcome, folks. My name is Dan Bisig, and I have been an independent educational consultant for 20 years now. So coaching families not only on the admission side, but also the funding side. Um, I know they kiddingly say I'm a unicorn because of that, because I do both sides of the coin. But love what I do. Love working with the families all across the United States, and just excited to be with you this evening as we do this presentation.
Love it. Yeah, let's get going. And just a heads up, if you have any questions, please ask them. We'd love to, either during it or at the end, answer questions you may have. If you can just try to put them in the Q&A below. So avoid the chat box. We'll use that to share some resources with you later on. So any questions, Q&A, put them in at any point, and we'll try to answer. So if you've been on a webinar before, you've seen the slide, this is just a sample of, the types of questions families ask us every day. College Aid Pro, we're here to help you, with both your admissions and your financial aid questions. Again, we have, just like me and Dan, a team of pros from across the countries who have been actively helping families for the last 20 years. And, I'm sure a lot of you have been asking yourselves these already. Should my son apply early decision? How will that impact us financially if he gets in? How will it help him get in? Are we looking at the right schools? Will we get financial aid? I don't think we saved enough. Can we really afford that? And hopefully we answer some of those questions tonight and are always available to have further discussions with you moving forward. If you are on this call and you're a parent of a high school student and you went to college, it probably seems a little bit different and a little bit more complicated and a little bit more in your face and a little more crazy and definitely a little more expensive. And it is. It has changed a lot. And it definitely can feel like a maze. And we want to help you navigate this maze to make it a little bit more straightforward. There are thousands of colleges that we're choosing from. So the first thing, it's like, oh my goodness, there's a lot of colleges. How do I even know where to start? It's critical to build a list that fits your child. You will never hear us say here at College Aid Pro, the best school. It's really the right school for your son, your daughter, for you as a family. And finding, the right list begins with creating the right college list to get to that, right college choice. And that involves personal fit, academic fit, of course, financial fit, and really getting to a point where, spring of junior year, you have 10, 12, 14 colleges that you think as a parent, and obviously as the child going through this, these match everything I'm looking for in a school. And now let's talk through how we're actually going to get into them and afford them. You can just think of a few, yeah. So I want to just talk through some trends. So again, what has changed since you maybe applied to college and went to college as a parent. We've seen a pretty significant rise in applications, over the years. Definitely last year alone, we had about a 6% rise in the number of students applying via the Common App. I think I think we can see. If anyone else can't see the screen, let us know, but it may just be you, Brandon, eventually. I can see it. So a 6% rise in applications via the Common App, which is the portal to apply to most colleges out there. And this affected which schools would ultimately be safeties, targets, maybe reaches for students. And most students overestimated their chances and fell short with the increased competition. So, for example, a college that you think because maybe your GPA or SAT score is within their range or even a little higher would be a safety school. Now is a school that you were deferred at, or maybe waitlisted or didn't get into, and that's because more students are applying. I'm right across the river from New York City, NYU. They increased more than 50% over the last 5 years, and it's now the fifth most applied to college. And it has dropped to kind of single digits or close to that admit rate because of the number of students applying. Selective majors, also have shaped admission outcomes. So some schools, a lot of colleges you can apply undecided if you want, or you can apply as a sociology major or psychology. But when you look at some majors, specifically like business, computer science, some engineering programs, they have far lower admit rates than the colleges themselves. So when you're doing research, as a parent of an underclassman, it really doesn't help you to just say, all right, what is the admit rate for Michigan? Or what's the admit rate for UT Austin? Um, and many families will incorrectly assume that getting into a top major at a public university is easier than getting into an Ivy League school. Oftentimes that's not even true. In reality, the most selective academic programs, in the country now live inside those public, flagship schools that I just mentioned. And their admit rates, they can rival the Ivies. So UCLA, their computer science program last year admitted fewer than 3% of applicants. UT Austin, which I mentioned, their Macomb School of Business admitted fewer than 10% of all applicants. So those are, obviously UCLA 3%, that's less than it, a lower admit rate than Harvard. And also, you need to look out of state, in state. UT Austin, if you're a Texas resident, that's a good thing. You have a better chance of getting in. They have to accept or bring in 92% of the incoming class from the state of Texas. If you're outside, other states, it leaves about 8%. So much, much harder. So you want to, as you're building that list, to dig deeper. You're not just looking at overall admit rate, you're looking at major, state, is it a public school? Where are you located? To have a much, more realistic, look into what those admit rates would be. We go to the next one. So early apps. So I don't know, Dan, how you feel, but I'm not a fan of early decision. And for those that don't know, what that means, early decision is a binding agreement to the college. So you can apply to one school if they offer it early decision. And if accepted, then that's where you're going to go. However, there can be some financial implications there, which maybe we'll talk a little bit about later. But many top schools filled over half of their freshman class through binding early decision plans. Tulane, for instance, it's nearly impossible to be admitted to Tulane if you apply by regular admissions. You have to apply early. Vanderbilt admitted 61% of its class last year through ED. Northeastern, they tend to fill more than half of their class through early season this upcoming year. Michigan, University of Michigan, this year started early decision for the first time ever, and they didn't do that for the good of applicants, to give yourself a better chance potentially of getting in because you're committing it to. Really they were nervous because of the expected, less international applicants, this year with everything going on in our government, and they wanted to yield protect themselves, from being a backup to other schools, Ivies, and make you decide, that they are decide on Michigan as a priority early on. So underclassmen parents, what to take away from this: early decision can help you get into a college, but you're making a teenager decide in fall of their senior year where they want to go, and making you as parents decide, where you may have to pay a lot of money. So you really want to be sure that a good idea of what that college will cost in case the child is accepted and that's where they're going. Test scores have returned to power. After COVID or during COVID, colleges had to go test optional because they just, high school students were not physically able to take the SAT or ACTs. And schools were test optional. We're seeing a lot more schools require it. Ohio State just announced a couple months ago that the class of 27, so parents of juniors right now, if OSU is on your list, they're going to require the SAT or ACT for applicants. A lot of colleges still are test optional. Some are test free, like the UC system for now. But really important as parents of juniors and sophomores right now, a test plan should be in place, right? Because you don't know most likely what the final list is right now. So there may be some schools on there that will require um, testing. So you want to make sure you take two, maybe three tests, SAT or ACT, doesn't matter which one, but make sure you have those. And they're only offered a few times throughout the year. So you got to, look at that schedule early and make sure you get signed in and they can actually get into the test center that you want. And then personal narrative. And this is the college essay that you hear about. It remains one of the most powerful ways to stand out, especially when grades and test scores look similar across applicants. Your child's personal brand, is most clearly communicated through the Common App's personal statement and the activities list. However, with the rise of AI, some colleges are questioning, how authentic these, written responses are. And we may see in the coming years, video submissions or recorded interviews becoming more, common in this process. But students that, can articulate their story clearly across any medium, are going to have a major advantage here. And as parents of juniors right now, this is something, and Dan will talk about this a little bit later on, that your kids should be, beginning to think about, because they can work on the college essay now. We know what the questions are; they're out there, and it is a very important part, especially at highly selective universities. Go through this real quick. So early stats for class 2026. I said earlier that last year there's 6% rise. So far there's a 7% increase on that. So even more. First gen applicants are up 10%. More families are using fee waivers. That's up 6%. And the average number of application per student is up to 8.5. And the Common App, which I walked through this in a past webinar, the Common App platform that apply to colleges now has a direct admit feature. So when a student fills out their profile, colleges can see like their GPA, test score, and if they think they'd be, a good candidate, they will pop up on their screen, basically say, you can apply here for free and you'll get in. And like, it's a really quick application. You get in, drives up the applications, drives up those numbers. And again, sort of kind of a urine can mess things up because, schools can become more, competitive. So something to just be aware of out there. We'll go to the next slide.
Okay.
And no questions, right? So far?
Nope, nothing so far.
Love it.
Yeah.
So about, again, 4,000 colleges in the US. And, we want to be really smart with how we are choosing those. And this is going to be really helpful, especially for parents of juniors and sophomores. But if you want to go to the next page, we like to think of this as, and you can hit enter, I think, 3 times just to get things on the side on there. So
you can read
it. Yeah, thank you.
Yep.
Perfect. We want you to visualize a funnel system. Okay. So, start with all the possible colleges to choose from. And of course, we just are talking about, colleges in the United States. If you're looking at international schools, move those up. One of my favorite colleges I ever visit was Bocconi in Italy. Gorgeous college. Great for business. Take a look. But you want to narrow it down by a few different things. And, for us, I've changed over the years on this myself, but I do agree that, first and foremost is the academic fit. You ultimately go to college to get a degree in order to be employed and have a good life there. But what do you want? Do you want finance? Are you a student that already knows they want something like risk management, a school for a really good pre-law track that has good connections to law schools? Do you want a co-op school where you're actually doing an internship or two over the course of your 4 or 5 years there? Do you want to do it in business technology and be near Manhattan? Well, Stevens Institute of Technology in Hoboken would be a great fit. They have that. They're on the river looking at Manhattan, and they're a co-op school. Do you want an engineering co-op like Drexel is really strong at in Philly? Do you want to be a physician assistant and get in and out, well, Lemoyne College, a really nice Jesuit school in Syracuse, has a 5-year PA program. Do you want to be a veterinarian? Here in Jersey, Rowan has a great vet school. To me, the obvious criteria when determining whether or not a college is an academic fit, if it is an academic fit, is does it offer the program I want to study? Now, yes, we of course know that freshmen, sophomore, and junior, even seniors don't always know what they want to do. And part of what college is for is, kind of figuring that out. But it's college is too much money now, and is can be very difficult to get into. You want to make sure that you at least have a sense of some areas that would be exciting and that you're good at and want to pursue. So even if it's 3 different areas, we know what those 3 academic areas are. Let's find schools that offer. And then after identifying, that major or career path possibility, will you be with your academic peers? You don't want to be at a school that you're always struggling just, to stay afloat. There's a number of other criteria though, that, we don't want you to overlook, such as, the learning environment. Is the college, teaching via traditional lectures in a 500, person lecture hall? Or does the college, focus more on experiential learning or project-based learning? Where are you going to excel in? Do they offer an honors program? There's schools like Arizona State University that accepts most students that apply, has an amazing honors program called the Barrett Honors, which is sort of the gold standard, where you're with a few thousand students as opposed to 40,000, getting tremendous, opportunities, both financial and academic, and really good opportunities there. So look, do you want to be an honors program? What is the student to faculty ratio? What's the average class size? If your kid really needs to be have a strong relationship with a teacher, wants to participate in class, do homework's a big part of the grade. They're not going to do well at a Penn State where the first 2 years, they're regardless of the major, they're going to be in large lecture halls. So really encourage you, to think through all these types of things when deciding, which colleges are an academic fit. And then after that, once you've funneled those schools, right, these 50 schools have, the majors that I'm thinking about. In order to know if you can afford a school, you first need to know what your affordable budget is. It's crucial to know. The federal government's no longer writing blank checks for you to cash to pay for college. They're capping loans. So, do you know how much you can afford to pay cash, for college? Do you know how much a bank is going to lend you for a personal loan? With the recent passing of the big, beautiful bill, this step is no longer something you just, skip, can't kick, the can down the road. Telling yourself that you're going to figure out something, somehow is no longer an option. And our colleague, JP always says the worst thing actually is not, your child getting their college or their dreams and then figuring out you can't afford it, so they can't start. The worst is actually getting them there where they start and they're a freshman, and then second semester in freshman year, the colleges, send you the bill and you cannot pay that, so you have to take them out. That is the worst. We want to avoid that. And so we need to make sure there are schools that fit within your budget. And then after that, it's personal fit. Love telling my kids that I work with, through the admissions process about this. They're in high school classes right now for about 40 hours a week. In college, it's closer to 12 to 15 hours. And so what are you going to do, with all that free time? Will you be happy? It's impossible to list all the various reasons, why a child, likes or doesn't like a college. But, we want it to be a school that when they tour it ahead of time, it vibes with them. They feel good. They sort of see their people. If they want to be, kind of invisible in a city, yeah, they would love an NYU. If they want to roam a kind of contained campus and be with super friendly people that are really smart but not super competitive, they would love a Hamilton College in New York. So definitely want to focus on that. After they they have the majors, you feel like it's can be within budget. What are the the best personal fit for them, where they're going to be happy all 4 years there. And then we are getting to our final 10, 12, 14 colleges. And that's when we're working through strategy. How do we get in? How do we get the most money from financial aid and scholarships and make this work? All right. And then finally, and this is, really for everyone here, getting in the colleges. So you have your list. Now what? How do we get in? We don't want to go over 12 and not have a school to, send our kid. And we look at it really as defense versus offense. And what do we mean when we say that for admission strategy? Well, starting with the defense on the left here, this is all about the hard measurables, the things you need to get, your foot in the door, especially at, selective colleges. To get a good look, from the admission counselors. Yes, the GPA. That's the first thing that we hear. But let's dig a little deeper. It's not just that GPA, that grade, that 3.5, that 3.8, or 89, 92. What classes are you taking? And the question we always get is, is it better to take, a rigorous course load and get a lower GPA, or take less rigor and get a higher GPA? Well, the real answer is take a rigorous course schedule and get a high GPA. But can't always do that. But you don't, if you're looking for selective colleges, you're going to have some rigor on there. So if your school's an AP school, how many APs are you taking? If you took 2 as a junior and did really well, probably want to see an increase there, maybe 3 or 4 for your senior year. And the admission counselors will be looking at the classes that the high school offers and what you're taking and comparing that. They don't really compare, school to school. They're going to compare that student within the context of their school and their profile that they have there. Test scores, we talked about it, and those are pretty easy to find, like what the school's middle 50% are, also, the average scores. And, if you're in that average or above, that's good. It's going to help you. If below, potentially could keep you out of being looked further. For any of our Texas families, class rank, obviously very important. I'm sure some other states and schools rank is there, but Texas, pretty much every public school, they have the ranking system. But not at most colleges or most high schools, do not rank. So if you're seeing that, don't worry about it. So these are really just like your checklist items. And most public universities, these numbers often determine whether, the application's even reviewed, just because they're getting 20, 30, 40, 50, 70, 100,000 applications. And if you don't meet these benchmarks, it's hard to, kind of play in the game there. But this is really just the beginning, especially when it comes to target and reach schools. And that brings us to the offense. And the offensive strategy is that's where like real admission strategy and scholarship leverage happens. This is how you separate yourself from thousands of other students who have similar grades and scores. The one to all the way to the right, demonstrate interest. Are you reaching out to your regional rep? Did you attend the campus tour or engage in virtual sessions? Schools track everything. I do some reading for a small college, and we have data on every student and their family. And some schools know if you follow them on social media. Every student that's thinking about applying to a college and then should have visited their site, filled out a prospective student. It takes 2 seconds. You're in their system. The last thing you want, especially for a college that you are very interested in, is for the school to hear about you first. The first time hearing about you is when you apply. There should be other data points in there, so they know that you're not just throwing out an application on the Common App, which we said earlier is very easy to do. The extracurriculars, super important. On the Common App, you have space for 10 extracurriculars. You don't need all 10 activities. It very much here is quality over quantity. And I tell my students, like, imagine a mission counselor who's reading their 900th application. They get tired. They are human. Imagine they get tired and only read the first 3 activities. What do you want them to see? What is most important there in your life, that your involvement, that you want this person to know about you? Letters of recommendation. Most colleges will want a guidance counselor letter of recommendation and 1 teacher letter. So kind of an overview, personal recommendation from the guidance counselor and an academic recommendation from a teacher. I'll leave you with these two pieces of advice. Junior parents, your students should be thinking about this now. And like if they have an idea of major, I want to do engineering. Yeah, it could help to have a math teacher or a science teacher. They don't necessarily need that. Some schools, MIT will ask for very specific, academics to have recommenders on there. But most it's really just a teacher that want a class that you've done well in. Doesn't need to be your best class, but one that you put some effort into, and you think the teacher can really showcase that on a letter. And honestly, it really should be junior year teacher. It doesn't have to be. Sophomore year is okay, but the junior year, kids change a lot from 9th grade, 10th grade to 11th grade. And junior year is the last full year before they're applying to college. Is obviously the most recent, but they really should start thinking about that now. Parents of juniors, and whoever they think they want to ask them soon. Ask them what the process is. What do they need from them? Do they need them to be like a brag sheet? But especially for popular teachers, they can sometimes fill up quickly and say, "Hey, I'm only taking the first 20 that ask me." So don't be left behind there, and make sure you're talking to them about that now. And then finally was the essay, which we talked about before. And this is the human moment. There's so much quantitative data in a student's application. The essay is a chance for the student to share a glimpse into their life, their story, show their writing, and it's really the glue that binds the application here. So hopefully this is helpful. I think we'll pass it off to Dan here, and I'll jump into the Q&A in a second.
Okay, cool. Let me do this real quick. I've been trying to answer questions as we go. All right. Well, listen, Joe, thanks. That was fantastic. And Joe really has covered a lot of the things that we're going to talk about next. But the thing I will say to you is this. Every year is a little different. Yes, there are building blocks for every student based on what you've got to do. And it starts early. And so what we're going to do is we're going to break it down. We're going to look at the freshman, sophomore, and junior years. We'll spend a lot more time in the junior year. But just realize, again, these are just the building or the beginning pieces to this. As we say with the freshman year, and I know Joe's run into this too, as I have, there could be a student who maybe has a tough start to their academics. What I mean is, right from the beginning, you want to build good habits, students. And parents, if you've got students that maybe struggled a little bit in their first semester, this next semester is a big one. It's an opportunity for you to get out there and really encourage them, and as they're working on their grades, because the thing that you have to recognize is the grades that are ultimately sent off to colleges start at the beginning of the freshman year and the end at the end of the junior year. And so the only exception would be colleges that might ask for mid-year grades, midterm grades, if they'll allow that. But in the vast majority of cases, you're going to be using those 3 years of grades. So starting off strong is important. We also believe in balance. You guys are in a situation in the freshman year, students are, where you're still trying to get to know this whole high school process and what's going on and the kinds of things that go along with that. And so our encouragement to you is make sure that you get involved, that you explore lots of clubs and sports and activities. Really, this is a time for exploration. It's a time for sampling, not specializing at this point. I mean, you really are trying to get a sense, and your students are trying to get a sense of who they are and what they might want to do in the future. Because of that, because they're trying different things, it's okay to start tracking this type of thing, the activities that they're involved in. And we really do encourage you to do that, because I can tell you, in working with juniors and seniors, that a lot of times they forget things that they've been involved with. Now, sometimes I've had students, and I bet Joe has too, that have done an incredible job from day one of tracking what's going on. And so it's all about you keeping a tally, so that in the future, when you need to start identifying what you're going to actually report to colleges, that you've got a good handle on the most important, the ones that you showed leadership and all these kinds of things. This is also a time for curiosity without any pressure. I mean, truly what we're suggesting to you here is that this is a time for you to go out and maybe visit some colleges. And you may be going, Dan, but it's just my freshman year. And yet I absolutely think that it's a great time to start, checking things out. And you're going not to do an official visit, but maybe if you're close by, you get a chance to stop by, maybe do lunch there. Maybe there's a museum or something that's on the campus that you want to check out, or some kind of an event. It's all about just the experience of getting on campuses and checking them out and seeing what you think. Um, this is also a great time, mom and dad, to start having some real serious conversations. One of the biggest challenges, and again, Joe mentioned this, is the whole idea of when are you going to kind of have the money talk? I mean, when are you going to talk about where you guys are and what's going to happen in the future? And so our recommendation is that you really start to talk about things. And this is more of a light conversation. It doesn't have to be, too intense, but it's better that you start to have these conversations now than to just spring it on your students or your kids in their senior year, after they've already been thinking about college. But try to normalize the fact that you guys are going to have conversations. You are going to work through the details. And again, definitely encourage self-discovery. This is a time for trying different classes out. Students, gives you just a chance to see what's out there and what kind of opportunities you have. Again, this is your foundation. Your freshman year is the chance to really explore and figure out, what things you like and what things you don't like, and then also to get a general sense of colleges and things like that. So, any other thoughts on that, Joe?
Nope, not right now.
Okay. All right. Let's move on to our sophomore year. So, what's happening in the sophomore year? Well, things get a little bit more focused. The key is, again, there's only these 2 more years of high school that are left. And so, starting to map out things as you're starting to think about, okay, what might I take in my junior year? Are you going to be taking any AP or IB courses? Does your school offer dual enrollment? Moms and dads, as you're, coaching your students through that, I mean, it's obviously great to be going to the meetings with the parents, or the parents' conferences with the teachers, I should say. Just a chance to be able to review things with them and also to kind of map out what's going on. This also could be a time when a student is going to take the PSAT or the pre-ACT, which is, in this case, really no pressure because it's a practice. It's a chance for you to, get a sense of what are these tests going to be like. You're definitely, from an activity standpoint, going to start really identifying which ones you're really, focused on by this point in time and which ones you really enjoy. Because now you're starting to get a couple of years doing similar things. One thing that we talk an awful lot about is when it comes to activities, kind of having a real laser focus on a couple, not the scattergram of a lot. Part of that's because colleges are really interested in seeing students that have been focused and dedicated on things. Where have you made a difference in your community? What kinds of things have you done? When it comes to college at this point, start talking to your parents a lot more, siblings, relatives, anybody that you know. Where did they go? What size school? What did they love about the schools that they went to? And again, if you're close by to some of these institutions because of the vacations that you're taking, then absolutely see if you can carve out time, or mom and dad, if you can carve out time to do a drive through the school. Maybe you can do a visit, at this time. Whatever works is going to give you the chance to explore, these different places. And then now we want to start talking about things like planning a productive summer. The key to this is during the 10th and 11th grades. Yes, it's great to have some time off, students. Don't get me wrong. I mean, I remember those times as well. But this is also a time when maybe you're starting to dial things in and you can really get involved. I mean, there's a ton of camps that are out there. There's opportunities to do community service, any number of things while still taking a break from your schoolwork. So the stat that's on here that's pretty telling, 2016 hours that is available in your summer. And by the way, admissions counselors are counting on the fact that you're going to do something. Okay. They do want to see that you're involved with that. Joe, any thoughts on that?
Just on the college visits for parents who haven't dipped your toes in this yet, it's very easy, and pretty much all colleges have the same model. If you go on their website and look, go to admissions, and then for college visits, Most of them just have a calendar that you can click on, and it'll tell you the times, and you just register right there. And most of them are, like a 45-minute info session where you sit down, they give a whole review of the school and admission and academics and everything, and then a campus tour. Generally, you're there for 2 hours, but you can start doing that again if you live nearby some schools, or you are going on vacation. It's a great way to start seeing them, and it's very easy to do.
Yeah, and the other thing is you never know, they may even throw in lunch for you.
It's true. Yeah, get
Sometimes,
lunch and absolutely. And demonstrate interest, which we talked about. That's obviously a good way to do that. And regardless if you visit as a freshman, sophomore, junior, it'll go in there. So if you apply, that will pop up in their system when the application comes through.
yeah, absolutely. That's good. That's really good. All right, let's move on to the junior year. This is when things really start to come together. Again, remember, you got to maintain that GPA, because as we say, trends matter. So for example, back to my original observation, let's say that the freshman year that maybe a student got kind of a slow start, maybe things were a little rocky there. Well, the good news is that by moving forward through your sophomore, junior year, you can demonstrate to the school that, hey, I've got this. I figured it out. I learned the study techniques that I needed, or any number of other things that went on, or I had to learn how to balance what was going on with not only my academics but the sport. And mom and dad, you know how that is. You know the balancing act that has to take place here. So make sure that when it comes to the academics, though, that the student is being very intentional about identifying the courses that they're going to take based on rigor and fit. For example, if a student is looking at engineering, they've got to have the math. If they're looking at things in the medical profession, they have to have the science and or the math, and different things like that, so that you are just making sure that they're going to have the prerequisites that these types of programs are looking for. I mean, Joe already talked about the fact that there are college programs out there that are very difficult to get into. That gets compounded if you, for whatever reason, missed something that they're looking for, like maybe physics is something they really do care about, or that fourth year of a language they really do care about, those types of things.
Mhm.
So make sure that you're focused on that. Also, make sure that your student has taken enough of the standardized tests, the ACT or the SAT. Even for those folks that are joining us from, say, California, if you're looking outside the state of California, you better take the test. You're going to have to take the test to make sure that you're balancing things out. Remember, we're looking through this entire process of trying to give colleges a reason to say, yes, yes, we'd love to admit you. And oh, by the way, yes, we'd love to give you some scholarship money. And that truly does come down to the holistic options that you're providing. In other words, all the reasons for them to say yes. When it comes to your activities, this is truly where we are diving into and focusing in depth on specific ones that you're doing. These colleges out there, every one of them, are looking for, again, and Joe said this, leadership. They're also looking for consistency. Again, not this ping pong ball of bouncing around to different things. They really do want you to have found kind of your calling, the things that you're interested in, the places that you really can make an impact. And by doing that, it can make a huge difference. So again, one or two main activities is really where it's going to stand out. And the good part about that is it's also going to give you something to write about, whether it's supplemental essays that the colleges require. Maybe it's even your primary essay that you're writing. These kinds of things can come from the activities that you're involved in. When it comes to your major and or the direction as far as what you're going, hopefully by this point in time, you've done some type of a career assessment. As soon as mom and dad, you feel like your student is mature enough to handle that, we encourage you to have them do something. There's some great tools that are out there, but it really is trying to narrow things down. You're going to know pretty quickly, kind of like in my case, I knew I was never going into medicine because the idea of blood and guts and even dissecting things in biology was not my idea of a good day. In fact, I intentionally skipped biology. But I knew that I enjoyed things with mathematics and so forth. And in business. And that's the direction I ended up going initially. So try to narrow things down, try to align those classes and the activities that the student is taking with the interest. I mean, students, if you're going to be doing it, make sure that these things connect. It really does make it easier. And then also, specifically the junior year is really when it's all coming together, so that you're prepared for the senior essays. And then now it's time to really begin meaningful college exploration. What are we talking about here? Well, for sure, you are visiting or will have already visited anywhere from 3 to 6 schools of different sizes, of different locations, so that you're getting a sense of what's the right fit for the student, for you students. How do you feel about the campus vibe and size? And by the way, to see the campus vibe, you really need to be there when school is in session, so that when the bell rings, you can see what happens and what the student body looks like and all that kind of stuff. I'll never forget when we were when I visited Ohio State, just the mass of students. In fact, so many students on campus when the bell rang that the cars that were in the roads had to stop so the students could change class. I mean, it's just a pretty amazing thing. And maybe that's overwhelming for a student. What other support services do they have that are going to help to make your students successful? Or, will there be tutoring? Where there'll be mental health services, all kinds of things that are there. It's truly all about trying to find out what is going to be at that school that's going to be, or that's going to allow your student to be successful. Joe, anything that you want to say there?
No, I think that, yeah, that's perfect.
Okay. I do want to make one comment about that last thing here at FIT that talks about rankings. So many people get caught up in US News and World Reports or any of the others that are out there, and recognize that just because those reports say that these are the top schools does not mean that you, the student, or mom and dad, that your student is going to be successful at that school. So be careful about that. Make sure that you're having very transparent conversations about what they're looking for, what's going to work for them. Okay. All right. Also, we've got to deal with this whole thing of strategy, cost, and what comes next. So first things first, you got to build a working college list. And this really does happen in the junior year. It's not that you couldn't have been working on this before, but is it, again, back to what Joe said, academic, social, financial fit. I even throw in geographic fit, because I can tell you that I have had students before head to a school to get as far away from everybody in their hometown, only to be the loneliest person on that campus. And so we've got to be careful about that. And this is where we start to talk about 3 categories of schools: likely schools, schools that the student's going to be happy at; target schools, sometimes referred to as 50-50s, where it could go one way or the other; and then reach schools or dream schools. That's another category. Whatever you do, folks, do not allow a student to build up their list 100% or heavily focused on reach schools. Applying to more reach schools does not necessarily increase your odds of getting into a reach school. You've got to be very diligent and focused as far as what's going on here. And then also, for sure, just like Joe had talked about, we've got to make sure whether colleges require test scores, whether it gives you an advantage from both admissions and or scholarships, those types of things. Again, we've talked about having open conversation. Now's the time to get into the nitty gritty when it comes to the money. Don't have unrealistic ideas when it comes to the cost. I had a meeting today with the family where mom and dad have got their ideas and the student has something totally different. I'm talking about a gap of about $50,000. Well, you don't want to have those kinds of conversations or those kinds of surprises come up in the senior year. So make sure that you're talking about how it's going to work and whether or not scholarships are going to be part of the solution as well. And then testing, of course, whether that's necessary for the scholarships. Plan ahead. Joe already did a great job of talking about this when it comes to the letters of recommendation. I mean, really identifying those dynamite teachers that think you are the best thing since sliced bread, students, and really is going to give you the best letters of recommendation. Make sure, students, that you guys are involved and engaged with your teachers. You could be the smartest person in the class, but if they don't really know you, then it's going to be hard for them to write a letter of recommendation for you. So don't just swoop in there and ask for those last minute recommendation letters, or just don't put yourself in that position. And then once again, let's make sure that we focus on planning for a great summer, whether it's work. By the way, colleges really do love students that are already showing a good work ethic. So they do value that. Again, whether you're doing service, enrichment programs, some kind of a program that's tied to your interest. It could be, again, a summer program that you're doing at a college or university, whatever it might be, and or still doing some test prep and or taking tests in the summer, if that's possible.
And one thing I just want, and there's a question on this for the summer programs. A lot of colleges offer them. Some of them are, pretty pricey. There are a few out there that you are very, very selective, and happy to talk through those on a consult. And if those that you get into those summer programs that actually can look good on an application, maybe potentially move the needle. But the vast majority of them, can be good for the student and a good learning experience, especially if it's 1, 2, 3, 4 weeks at the college. So they're actually living there and going through that and meeting friends and networking. So a great experience for them, but should never, I don't want any parents paying thousands of dollars thinking that going to a Brown University summer course is going to then help them get into Brown. That's just not the case. So again, great for experience for the student, especially if it's a subject that they really want to learn, and can definitely go on the application. But the vast majority of these programs won't move the needle for you getting into universities.
Yeah, Joe, I'm so glad you mentioned that. That's so right. I mean, sometimes it's referred to as a pay to play type
Yeah.
of situation. Rarely do you see that helps. I mean, there just aren't that many. And not to mention, folks, you have to know too that there's a lot of colleges that love that there's an outside company coming in and renting their space versus just sitting there during the summer months. So just be careful with that. Yeah, great stuff. Okay, well, let's also talk about this. We truly believe that this is not a time about stress. We worry. I mean, about families. In fact, you guys know it. You hear the stories about the students that are just stressed to the hilt. They're taking too many AP courses. They're involved in too many things, and it really creates a problem. Yes, there will come a time when there's work that has to be done. In fact, this whole admissions process is a marathon. It becomes a sprint only at the end when you're trying to get things in. So, just recognize, as we say here, perfection isn't the goal. Um, there is no perfect resume. It's not required. Really, what it is these colleges are absolutely positively looking for the authentic student. They want to hear their voice. They want to hear their stories. These colleges want to bring in a diverse student population. Somebody earlier asked a question as to, and I'll mention it, as to whether or not race is still used in admissions, and it is not. But there are other ways that colleges identify what makes students unique, their backgrounds, where they live. I mean, all these different kinds of things are really important, and don't be afraid to talk about those things in your applications and in your essays. So truly the junior year is about positioning. You still have a lot to finish and a lot of work to do, but it's about making sure that you're in a position to move forward. Now, when it comes to essays, I'm one of those crazy guys who actually has my students start working on essays even here in the spring, at least starting to work on it, because I'm all about trying to suggest that you take some of the stress off of yourself. But for those of you that are also doing advanced placement or IB types of programs, or other things, and or sports, it can add to the stressors. You don't need to have final essays ready to go, but it is a great time for you to start jumping in and working on things. Start thinking about the stories that you're going to tell. This is your opportunity to tell your story, your unique story. And so this is a time to reflect on who you are and what you've done, so that you're really ready then to sit down and write some compelling essays. Also, this is a tough time because students start to compare themselves. And moms and dads and students, you guys are at parties and people are talking, and they're giving you ideas and suggestions. Just recognize again that you are yourself. Focus on your trajectory, and not on others' timelines. just recognize the fact that there are things that you want to avoid. We mentioned avoiding social media. We really do mean that. You got to be careful because by association, sometimes you can be guilty, and we don't want you to put yourself into a compromising situation. Um, but just know that when it comes down to every single college out there, they're going to take a look at you from an individual basis and make their decision. So again, give them a reason to say yes. And then if you've been working on your college list over all these years, it's a matter now of just dwindling it down to where it's a workable number. Joe already mentioned, and I've seen the same thing in my practice, the number of students that are applying to way more colleges than ever before. Again, sometimes it's because they think I've got to apply to a huge number of the Ivies to be successful, and yet that's not necessarily the case. So, just right now it's about working on the list, not a final one, and really giving clarity to your interest, your grades, and the cost, because you want to make sure that all of that's coming together and that you're having some authentic conversations with your parents through this whole thing. And so, mom and dad, don't be afraid to sit your students down and have a conversation. Any other ideas there, Joe?
No, just saying, we're saying not to stress, but college apps do open up in 6 months, August 1st, and you can start applying then. So it will be here before you know it for parents of juniors. And definitely, if you haven't started planning what we've talked about tonight, now is the time to start.
Great. Last thing, and I'm just going to run through this quickly because of the time here, but this idea of Ivy or bus thinking, I'm not sure where you guys are on this, but just make sure that you are approaching this with your eyes wide open, that you're truly, understanding that there is a right fit school for every student out there, whether it's Ivy or not. Your student is going to be successful because of who they are, not necessarily because of the school that they go to. Demonstrated interest, Joe already talked about. We've already talked about visiting every college. And then just recognize one of the advantages, for example, of working with somebody like Joe or myself is the fact that time is your friend. It really does give you the ability, as you're being coached through this process. And so just know this, that it's a matter of spreading things out, working on them, not putting yourself into the fact where you're panicked, where you're stressed at the end, because you didn't put the time and effort in, and suddenly having to figure out, okay, what are you going to do? How are you going to make this work? Just know this, that it's based on consistency, balance, and well-being. The well-being of the student, the well-being of the relationship with the parents throughout this thing. We don't want you to get to the point where you're burned out. And I promise you, the earlier you start the process, the happier everybody will be. And I think that's probably the easiest way to put that.
Love it.
All right.
There's one more here, and then a little checklist for you guys to have. And I'll go through this real quickly, and we'll just get into the last slide. But especially for parents of juniors, make sure a lot of the juniors I'm working with right now, we are going through course selection. It's very important. We sort of know the schools are looking at potential majors and lining that up with the courses they've done well at, what they're interested in going forward, and the rigor. Making sure they're registered. There's only a handful of more test dates out there for juniors, and identifying any type of potential leadership possibilities in their activities, having that really hyper-focused working college list, and making sure that you're getting to some colleges that are on your list, whether in person or virtual, and that if you're going to do something in the summer, which you should, what is that anchor that's going to be fill up the majority of those hours we talked about. All right, and I just put in the chat. So really important, guys. We have a lot of free resources, and one of them are just 15-minute consults that if you schedule tonight, you can get that free consult. And they're with people like me and Dan and other pros here at College Aid Pro. And we're just gonna have a conversation. We're gonna see, what questions you have, where you're at in the process, and what type of help you need. And we help with both making sure you can afford college and setting a realistic plan in place and getting you through the beginning and the end, and the admission side of helping your student do all the work, figure out all the colleges, write all the essays, help them with the project management to keep them on track and keep you out of fighting with them at the dinner table. So both admissions help, financial aid help, and we offer it all. And you have the ability to just scan this QR code or click the link that I put in the chat. Make sure you sign up. They do go very quick. We have another webinar that's running right now as well. They're sharing the same link. So sign up for that free consult. And it's 8 o'clock on the dot. So we appreciate your time. Most of the country's freezing out there, so stay warm. And thanks for joining us. Thanks, Dan. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. Thanks,
All right.
everybody. Have a great evening.